Hi, I'm Andrea Arsenault Coleman, and welcome back to Christ Talk. We now give you the second segment of our discussion on child sex abuse with Dr. Chinwé Williams, a licensed professional counselor. In this conversation, Dr. Williams shares insight on the culture of silence and how it's limiting the change many of us would like to see. Dr. Williams, thank you so much for joining us again and actually just continuing the conversation. So talk a little bit about the culture of silence. What is it and what is its impact on society?
Yeah, absolutely. So the culture of silence really can relate to a number of topics. So in this case, we're talking about child sexual abuse. So in the last segment, we talked about the really sobering statistics. 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused by the time that they are 18 years old. I want to throw another sobering statistic to the audience. 93% of those children will know their perpetrator. It will be someone known by the child. It will actually be someone that is trusted by the child. So the most common form of child sexual abuse is incest. And so that's just a topic, Andrea, that remains taboo. People don't want to talk about it. People don't want to hear about it. But unfortunately, it still occurs. And so I really, really appreciate you providing this platform to discuss something that is considered a silent epidemic, which is childhood sexual abuse, and how the culture of silence actually reinforces sexual abuse.
So how should people respond? How do we break that cycle and I guess just bring more awareness in a responsible and healthy way that actually produces healing
Produces healing, yes.
and change?
And change.
Yeah.
I think what we're doing now is really helpful. So before we can address any issue in terms of how we respond or intervene, I think it's important to understand it. So the culture of silence is really a way to perpetuate the silencing of victims. And the sad news, I keep bringing sad news, but there'll be hope coming. But the sad news is that there's so many different factors within our society that perpetuates this. And so one factor is victim blaming. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So victim blaming is basically the transfer of responsibility from the perpetrator, which should be the person that shoulders the responsibility for committing this crime. But what we do as a society is we transfer the responsibility from the perpetrator to the actual victim. And we do it in a number of ways. And what's interesting is that there's a sociological and psychological component to this. Victim blaming really is a way to create distance from an uncomfortable topic. And what's more uncomfortable than childhood sexual abuse? But what we do as individuals in society is that we look for ways to sort of point the finger or blame the victim or the survivor for what's happened. And psychologically speaking, the way that that works, or the way that that quote unquote benefits us as a society, is that we can then say this awful, terrible thing that provokes such fear and helplessness within me didn't happen because of the other person. It happened because the victim didn't do enough to keep him or herself safe. So then that means that I, as a parent, can do so much to keep my child safe, or I, as an individual, can keep myself safe. But the truth is, there's no foolproof way that individuals can be kept from this terrible experience. And so that's what victim blaming really does.
Wow, that's interesting. So when looking at like the Me Too movement right now, how helpful or beneficial is that to helping to create change?
Yeah, it's extremely helpful. So Tarana Burke, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, is really the founder. A lot of people don't know about Tarana, and she's an African-American female, and she's been around for a while. So years ago, 2006, that seems like ages ago, and she actually used the social media platform, which is MySpace, which no longer exists, to really, again, bring awareness. And she really provided a vehicle and a program called Empowerment Through Empathy. empowerment through empathy is what I believe it's called. And it's a way to bring awareness to sexual abuse. And at that time, she really was targeting minority individuals, so Black and brown girls who live in impoverished communities, because of course they don't get a lot of media spotlight, right? And what I love about her story and her way of bringing awareness is how it really came about. So Tarana mentioned that she received a post from a 13-year-old who said, "I have been sexually abused." And Tarana didn't know how to respond. And so what she says now, and I think it's so beautiful, that what she wishes she had done is simply wrote "Me Too." So that's really where the hashtag comes from. And so now it's more, I think, known as sexual abuse and sexual harassment in the workplace, but it really was about bringing empathy and empowerment to individuals who really don't get a lot of media spotlight.
And how important is that when you talk about, I guess, the various populations in our society? And what I'm thinking about is in the series, the juror in the artist's first trial, who said he did not like the way the young witnesses were dressed, the way they sounded, and it was all subjective.
Yes.
How hurtful is that?
Yeah.
And how does that reflect on the way we receive and perceive the various racial groups of our society?
Yeah. So this is exactly what we're talking about. It really is another example of the culture of silence. The many ways that society silences victims or survivors by pointing out the way that they're dressed, by dismissing them because they come from different environments or socioeconomic classes. I think it's also interesting to point out that I believe there were only females that were discussed in the docuseries.
That's correct.
Is that accurate? But what we're talking about happens to males as well. And so victim blaming, which we just talked about, applies to male victims. So society has an interesting way of looking at masculinity. So what we've seen through research is that when males are sexually assaulted, they are seen as weak, they are seen as effeminate, they are seen as homosexual, and that, I guess that's supposed to mean that they deserved it or they were targeted in a specific way. So those are the things that are really important for us to take a hard look at as members of society, how we treat individuals who disclose that they've been abused. Something else I want to mention, Andrea, is different various points of disclosure. How we respond to individuals during various points of disclosure is very, very critical. And so the research also points to facial expressions, tone of voice playing a role when someone says that they've been sexually assaulted, because even having a neutral face or a dismissive look, what's perceived as dismissive or disapproving or judgmental, can really have an impact in if the child or really the adult says any more about the abuse or later recants. So so it's really, really important to believe someone and have an open heart and be gentle in the way that you are approaching the individual that's sharing or disclosing abuse.
A little bit of care really does go a long way, doesn't it?
A long way. Yes.
Wow. If you will, as we close, Dr. Williams, just a message of how we individually and personally can help break this culture of silence, and how important it is for us to do so.
Yeah. So I'm all about the village. It takes a village, and what's meant by that is that it takes the community and it takes professionals. It's not just a law enforcement issue, criminal justice issue. It's not even just a mental health issue, childhood sexual abuse. It's a community, societal issue. And so it really is going to take every single one of us across a number of disciplines, professions, doctors, lawyers, nurses, educators, mental health professionals, concerned advocates to really put a dent in this epidemic. And it starts with just being aware of the signs, the symptoms of childhood sexual abuse, and being willing to talk about it.
Wow, that's very good. We thank you so much for your heart your counsel, of course, your wisdom, and everything else that comes along with your counsel. So if you will just very briefly again, if you'll just establish once more, repeat once more, how we can reach you if anyone is in need of speaking to someone professionally, how they can contact you.
Absolutely. You can reach me by linking to my website, which is www.meaningfulsolutionscc.com. Again, www.meaningfulsolutionscc.com. My email address is located on the contact page. If you want to email me directly, you can reach me at cuwilliams.lpc@gmail.com. cuwilliams.lpc, LPC stands for Licensed Professional Counselor, @gmail.com.
All right. Thank you again, Dr. Williams.
Right. We thank Dr. Chinwé Williams once again for joining us with such meaningful and insightful information. If you'd like to reach her again, her website is www.meaningfulsolutionscc.com. Again, www.meaningfulsolutionscc.com. And there is no dot after the www. It's all one word, then .com. So we thank her again, and we hope this program has been of benefit to you. We're not quite certain when we're going to broadcast again via video, but if we do, we hope that you will join us. In the meantime, if you've been impacted in any way by this subject, please know that there is help available for you. The National Alliance on Mental Illness actually has a hotline that you can call. You can visit them online at NAMI.org. Again, NAMI.org, and there's a hotline crisis number at the bottom of their webpage. Lastly, we want to remind you that the Lord is with us. He tells us throughout His Word that He will never leave us nor forsake us. And in this world which is fallen and the behavior which is so uncontrollable and hurtful at times, He can see us through it all. So we pray now that you will remember Isaiah 41:10, where He says, "Fear not, that I am with you," or "for I am with you." And so we pray that with you, for you, and we thank you for joining us today.